Issues warning as opposition political parties and CSOs endorse a 3-day nationwide protest.
Nous invitons toute la population togolaise.
We invite the entire population of Togo, the different professional and social groups, as well as the traditional religions, Muslims and Christians, to support this dynamic protest for the well-being and the democratic future of Togo.
Guinea's Transitional National Assembly set to present draft new constitution to General Doumbouya amid disapproval. Experts react to President Tinubu's turn as chairperson of ECOWAS.
I think, very weak performance. We cannot say that his term was really successful term. I think he was more passive. If I have to give a grade out of 10, I will just say 5 out of 10.
And workers of Ghana's National Identification Authority begin an indefinite strike over unpaid allowances. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Augustine Coley with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining this edition of Newslink. We begin in Togo, where 7 opposition political parties and civil society organizations have declared support for the planned 3-day nationwide protests amid the rise in social political tension in the country. Youths on June 26, 27 and 28 wish to intensify their denunciation of the newly adopted constitution and increasing rights abuses, among others. At a press conference on Tuesday in Lomé, they once again expressed their frustration with the prevailing situation in the country. Christopher Teacher reports.
The opposition political parties are the Democrats, ADI, CAR, DMP, LDP, PSR and Santé du Peuple, or People's Health. For these political parties, the situation is critical, and they are calling on the public to support the demonstrations planned for June 26, 27 and 28. Tagon Samberi Nwaken is the coordinator of the Dynamics for the Majority of the People DMP.
Nous invitons toute la population togolaise.
We invite the entire population of Togo, the different professional and social groups, as well as the traditional religions, Muslims and Christians, to support this dynamic protest for the well-being and the democratic future of Togo. We are calling on the international community to support the Togolese people in the legitimate quest for democracy and social justice.
According to these political parties, since June, a glimmer of hope has been reborn with a new dynamic of protest led by Togolese youth. They are calling for a complete change of the political system. Sambari recalls.
Les heures que nous vivons sont graves. Elles ne doivent laisser personne.
This moment is one where silence becomes complicity and where neutrality equals a position taken in favor of injustice. It is therefore the responsibility of each citizen to speak, to name things and to stand by the people.
Réclame le changement pour un avenir meilleur.
On the eve of these demonstrations, launched on social media, the Togolese government responded with an official statement. It reiterated the strict conditions for authorizing public demonstrations and warned against any unregistered gathering. Demonstrations are rare in Togo, as they have been banned in the country since 2022, following a deadly attack at Lomé's main market.
A report from WADR's Sylvie Ouedraogo in Lomé, voiced by Christopher Teacher. In Guinea, Transitional President General Mamadi Doumbouya is scheduled to receive the draft constitution from the National Transitional Council on June 26. However, on the eve of the government's review of the text, divisions are emerging within the political class. While supporters of the junta welcome the political, social and economic reforms enacted in the draft document, the opposition accuses the transitional parliament of drafting a constitution that favors the ruling military. Here is Abdullahi Hassan with the details.
The day after tomorrow, General Mamadi Doumbouya is due to receive the draft of Guinea's new constitution from the president of the transitional parliament. It will be then examined by the government before being submitted to a referendum on September 21, 2025. Its drafting was inclusive, supported by Musa Fofana, Chief of Staff to the President of the National Transitional Council.
There was a reckoning and everyone was involved. There have been 4 constitutions in the past. We know how these constitutions were rewritten. This latest one, all the unlucky ones, are part of because of the various processes we went through until it is now available as a draft constitution.
According to Al-Husseini Makenera, one of the junta's supporters, the new Guinean constitution contains articles that will advance the country's democratic progress.
The constitution respected a number of principles that can guarantee the happiness of all the unlucky ones. The approach respected transparency and inclusivity. It was stated that the ultimate potential is a potential of everyone.
The opposition, for its part, denounces the CNC's headlong rush. Selu Kansala Jallo, a senior member of Selu Dalin Jallo's Union of Democratic Forces of Guinea party, accuses Parliament of drafting a constitution favorable to the junta.
This is a scene in advance that is being organized to allow the CNRD to maintain its power, even if it means using arms.
Civil society organizations and political coalitions are already organizing to call on citizens to vote against the new constitution on September 21, 2025.
General Alpha Ibrahim Ambalde's report from Conakry, voiced by Abdullahi Hassan. Let's now take you to Nigeria, talking about President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's tenure as chairperson of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of State, the regional body's highest decision-making office on policies and actions. Tinubu was nominated in 2023 to head the organization shortly after being sworn in for his first term as leader of the Africa's giant. Why his election was marred with alleged irregularities, Tinubu assumed the Nigerian presidency faced with a plethora of issues, from a poor economy to corruption and general insecurity. In addition to Nigeria's internal governance climate, Bola Tinubu supervised ECOWAS for 2 years through troubling times. Imo Edit has the analysis of experts in the following report.
Observers say the re-election of Nigerian President Bola Tinubu as chairman of the regional bloc at the time indicated the failure of the region's leadership and disappointment to all ECOWAS citizens. In a wild attempt to address the spiraling regional economic, social, political and security tension, Tinubu promised radical reforms which, among others, should foster regional integration and cooperation. But no, his time was marked by several missteps. According to international relations experts, his perceived negligence or lack of understanding of the Central Sahelian dynamics was partly blamed for the friction in the region. Tinubu's announced directives, including cutting off electricity supply and closing land borders with Niger, and an attempt to militarily intervene in Niamey after the July 26 coup, stirred a conflict that triggered the withdrawal of Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger from ECOWAS. These states went into an alliance known as the AES Confederation, which is in the final stage of withdrawing from the regional organization. Still under his tenure, the security situation, characterized by terrorism, further deteriorated, with the coastal states of Benin and Togo facing increased attacks. There was also a rise in arms and drug trafficking, as a UNODC report indicates. On the political front, 2 member states, Guinea-Bissau and Togo, were accused of constitutional violations. The latter amended the law to allow an indefinite stay of foreign Asingbe in power, while President Umaru Sissoco Embalo is overstaying his time in office. Embalo should have departed February, but chose to stage elections in November 2025, citing legal proceedings. Nonetheless, Bola Tinubu's regime marked a turnaround for remittances to the regional bloc, increased advocacy and visibility, and CSO's engagement in the activities of the regional bloc.
Imo Edit fight that report.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Now, here in Senegal, the Senegalese Ministry of Finance has published its budget execution reports for the fourth quarter of 2024 and the first quarter of 2025. Total revenues mobilized in the first quarter of 2025 amount to more than 1 billion CFA francs, an increase of 9.7% compared to 2024. The document also indicates that external resources are lower. Only 3.27% of expected external resources have been mobilized, limiting investment financing. What impact could this have on the Senegalese economy? We discussed this with Dr. Suleiman Keita, an economist and research professor at Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar.
If
you've noticed the debt structure, you would see that the Senegalese government is going into debt. That is to say, the Senegalese government's current strategy is to increase its debt under controlled conditions. But I often say that the Senegalese government's revenue cannot allow us to meet the number of challenges at the moment, including the evolution of our public finances and also the evolution of a number of our macroeconomic indicators. So, what they can do now is to move towards what we call debt management in a controlled manner. But we can't perhaps gradually reduce it today, because today the economic system that has been put in place based on debt structure doesn't allow the central government to meet a number of these commitments without resorting to external sources, because the internal mechanism of the economy doesn't generate enough revenue to meet our spending needs. That's what's causing us problems. That is to say, when you borrow to repay debt or when you borrow to reduce consumption, you automatically doesn't have enough production capacity to repay that debt. So otherwise, you all remain in the debt spiral. But what do we need to do now? It's to put in place an economic system that allows us to borrow, but that debt will be channeled into an investment space that will be profitable in the long term.
Dr. Suleiman Keita is an economist and research professor at the Sheikh Anta Diop University in Dakar. Let's take you to Ghana, where the National Labour Commission has summoned striking staff of the National Identification Authority and the employer to a hearing on Thursday, June 26. The union declared an indefinite strike from Tuesday, June 24, following unresolved issues surrounding the payment of the operational support allowance. The aggrieved workers have accused the government of acting in bad faith over the failure to implement an agreement rescheduled in July 2024. From Accra, Nadia Tete reports.
Staff of the National Identification Authority, NIA, under the Public Services Workers Union of the Trade Union Congress, TUC, are on an indefinite strike over the non-payment of their operational support allowance. The aggrieved workers have accused government of acting in bad faith by failing to implement an agreement reached in July 2024. They say the strike will continue until their demands are fully met. Deputy General Secretary of the Public Services Workers Union, John Sampa, explains.
Anytime you hear that we are on strike, then it is something that we have dialogue and we have not gotten results. This is not a new allowance we are negotiating. This is an allowance that people have relied upon because they have enjoyed it, and some people have taken loans and expecting. This allowance is not too big, it's 20%, some of them it is 400, 450, 500, but of course we have budgeted with it.
The industrial action, which started on Tuesday, June 24, has crippled operations at NIA offices nationwide, with regional, district and premium service centers deserted, effectively disrupting all NIA-related services across the country. Meanwhile, the National Labour Commission, NLC, has summoned both the striking NIA staff and their employer, the government, to a hearing scheduled for Thursday, June 26, 2025. Management of the National Identification Authority is urging staff to suspend the strike and return to work while negotiations continue to address their concerns. For WADR, Nadia Tete, Accra.
You are still listening to Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Here is a reminder of our top stories. The government of Togo issues warning as opposition political parties and CSOs endorse a 3-day nationwide protest. Guinea's Transitional National Assembly set to present draft new constitution to General Doumbouya amid disapproval. Experts react to President Tinubu's tenure as chairperson of ECOWAS. Workers of Ghana's National Identification Authority begin an indefinite strike over unpaid allowances. Still ahead in the news, we have press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Thank you for staying with us. We are streaming live on YouTube at WADR News and on Facebook, WADR English Service. On Tuesday, June 24, Liberia joined the global community in observing the International Day of Women in Diplomacy, a day dedicated to recognizing the vital contributions of women in international relations and peace-building efforts. The celebration took place at the Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Monrovia, bringing together current and former women leaders from government, civil society, and international partners. The gathering allowed dignitaries to spotlight progress and chart a path forward for gender parity in diplomacy. WADR's Monrovia correspondent Abraham Parker reports.
Proclaimed by the United Nations General Assembly in June 2022, this annual observance honors women diplomats, addresses gender disparities within diplomatic circles, and inspires more women to pursue leadership roles in international affairs. Deputy Foreign Minister Deward Gray, speaking on behalf of Liberia's Foreign Minister, reaffirmed the country's dedication to increasing women's representation in diplomatic spaces.
For centuries, diplomacy was a realm where the voices of women were too often unheard. But history remembers trailblazers like Angie Brooks Randall, Ruth Gibson Caesar, Amelia Ward, Teresa Lee Sherman, Mary Brownell.
UN Resident Coordinator Christine Omotunin underscored the importance of the event, stressing the United Nations' unwavering commitment to advancing women's development and participation in diplomacy.
Let us reaffirm our commitment to advocating for an equitable future. Let us lift our voices together to ensure that the next generation of women diplomats can raise.
Additionally, UN Women Liberia Country Representative Comfort Langton proposed strategic measures to create a gender-responsive diplomatic community.
The first is to invest in a gender-responsive diplomatic pipeline, which I know is already underway, by expanding access to foreign service training, leadership development, and mentorship for women and girls. The second is to integrate gender equality in the foreign policy and national law. According to a 2024 Women in Diplomacy Index, only 20% of Africa's ambassadors are women. For Newslink on WADR, Abraham Parker, Monrovia.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
Let's join Sankole Janko for a review of the local dailies in the Gambia.
We begin with the Standard newspaper today, and the lead story on the Standard newspaper today reads, over 600 staff to leave under Gamcel privatization deal. Gamcel is the state's main communication institution. Majority leader explains NPP's position on diaspora voting. The second one reads, court orders IGP, QTV, Kerfatu and Fatu Network to produce video of police press conference on PIU shooting. Gambia condemns Israel's strike on Iran. Let's take a look at the stories on the Foreign newspaper. And the lead story is Honorable Swaibu Toure voices sharp critique on State of the Nation address. Recall President Barrow last Thursday delivered the State of the Nation's address at the National Assembly in Banjul. And according to this report, one of the critics of that State of the Nation's address is Swaibu Toure of PDOIS. Majority leader calls for united support for draft constitution. Let's take a look at the final newspaper for the day, and that is the Point newspaper. And the lead story on the Point newspaper reads, Tears in court as man narrates how ex-wife accused him of rape. Nam Sise warns draft constitution bill will be rejected if not withdrawn by July 7. This one reads, Nam tells government to equip security forces before rolling out CCTVs. And the final story for today reads, Yusundur takes legal action to protect integrity. These are the major stories making headlines on Gambian dailies.
Thank you, Sankula Janko, for the press review.
Politics,
analysis on major news,
social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
The guest interview segment this afternoon focuses on Nigeria's President Bola Ahmed Tinubu's tenure as chairperson of the ECOWAS Authority of Heads of States, the regional body's highest decision-making office on policies and actions. While his election was marred with alleged irregularities, Tinubu assumed the Nigerian presidency faced with a plethora of issues, from a poor economy to corruption and general insecurity. Denis Ndour, Vice President of the Senegalese Human Rights League, provides analysis of President Tinubu's tenure.
I think, very weak performance, because we were really dealing with peace for the sub-region. As you know, with the movement of IS, I think this is one of the biggest lack of diplomacy, successful diplomacy. We expect to have an ECOWAS where we have all countries from the West African, from the region, where everybody join. That's one thing. The second thing, that we know that those people who are moving for the economical side, they're always complaining. Women as well, they're always complaining. And I didn't talk about youth. So to mean that, obviously, we cannot say that his term was really successful term.
Some people blame, the lack of perceived and experience for the way he handled the Niger coup d'etat, with an attempt to invade the country as well as closing the borders with Niger. That, for some people believe, led to Mali and Burkina Faso withdrawing from the Burkina Faso withdrawing from the bloc. Do you blame him for that as well? Do you think he could have handled it better?
Yes, of course, because everything is about diplomacy. When diplomacy is successful, we never talk about utilizing forces. And whenever you want to utilize forces, most of the time is more for the civil than the military, So at the end, we cannot talk about ECOWAS of people where there is a problem, the leaders will use forces to solve the problem. So I think that was a really big mistake. And this new president has to work on, even though the IS, they might not gonna say that they're gonna dissolve their organization with them, to make sure they're still part of the region in terms of economical way and in terms of social way, because we need to move from country to country. We need to move not only for social issues, but also economical reason.
In that case, how would you rate his leadership?
I think he was more passive. If I have to give a grade out of 10, I will just say 5 out of 10, because he really didn't realize much. Sometimes you can have the intention of doing things, but at the end, population are not waiting for intention. They're waiting for practice. But unfortunately, it doesn't happen. So that's why I said that if I have to give a grade, I will say 5 out of 10.
The new chairman of the ECOWAS bloc is President Madabio of Sierra Leone, a former military man himself. What are your expectations, especially with regards to ECOWAS relationship with the AES? Because as a former general, you expect him to have a certain commonality with the leaders of that region. What are your expectations, particularly in relationship with the AES?
I think the first expectation is to talk to his friends, I can say, from army. As a general, he should be able to talk with Guinea, with Burkina Faso, with Niger, to make sure those as a military to come back, on track. Coming back on track means that we cannot divide our ECOWAS, even though we know that they have some frustration. But he should be able, as a general, as a military sense of thinking militarily, he should be able to get those back on track.
Dennis Ndour is the vice president of the Senegalese Human Rights League, providing analysis of President Tinubu's tenure as head of ECOWAS. And Sankule Jankori joins us with the latest in the world of sports. Good afternoon, Sankule.
Yes, good afternoon, Augustine. Let me get straight to some of the stories we have for you. And we're going to begin here in Senegal because veteran football journalist and consultant Ali Goloko has officially announced his candidacy for president of the Senegalese Football Federation. In his campaign statement titled Statement of Faith, Goloko outlined a bold 4-year plan focused on infrastructure upgrades, grassroots access, youth development, and promotion of women's football. And talking about Senegal, as the 2024 African Nations Championship CHAN kicks off from August 2 to 30th, all eyes are on the defending champions, Senegal, as they look to retain their crown on the East African soil. Away from Africa, of course, in the FIFA Club World Cup, Chelsea secured a 3-0 victory over Esperance de Tunis in the FIFA Club World Cup, advancing confidently into the tournament. Meanwhile, Benfica secured a place in the Club World Cup round of 16 Group C winners after a hard-fought victory over Bayern Munich in salt-watering conditions in the United States. The weather right now in America is 32 degrees. And players are really, really struggling. And tonight, Dortmund will take on Ulsan Hyundai, and Mamelodi Sundowns of South Africa will take on Fluminense in the Club World Cup. That's it for sports.
Thank you, Sankule. With that, we've come to the end of this edition of Newslink here in West Africa, Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening. And many thanks to Falilu So and to Seconde Jai for the technical support. To interact with us via our social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR English, on Facebook, WADR English Service, streaming live at WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is WADR's flagship gender program 50-50, but by 1 p.m., we will have Mustafa Jakite here with the news in French. I am Augustine Cully. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.